Dear students, good evening. Welcome to Excellence IAS. Let us do the editorial analysis for today, 28th December 2022. The first article, Handling the Fallout of China's Wilted COVID Strategy. This can be a good question for our upcoming interview. What is the difference between India's and China's strategy? In this case, across the world, everyone started believing that China's strategy of zero COVID was working initially. India also has went with severe lockdown as no one knows the outcomes of this particular COVID-19. In this scenario, slowly India realized this, lockdown is not working. So that's where appropriate COVID behavior is being announced. And also vaccine was developed. This vaccination has covered 90% of the population. So appropriate COVID behavior and vaccination, along with that natural immunity which grew in the society, which we also call as herd immunity. This has put India at a lower risk compared to China. In the case of China, the zero COVID policy, low vaccine coverage, low efficacy of the vaccines, added to that the lack of herd immunity. Herd immunity means the immunity which comes because of majority of the population getting infected, that is called herd immunity. So lack of these things, these have led to the present wave in China. In this scenario, what are the outcomes to the world from this? Remember, any new wave in any country, it is expected to spread across the world. If you take specifically in India, the severity is expected to be less, but however, the transmissibility of the virus is expected to be high. It means more people may get infected, but the herd immunity and vaccine-supported immunity is expected to raise to it. But if a new variant which cannot be addressed through our vaccines, if it develops what? That is where we need to keep genomic sequencing regularly. Let's work on genomic sequencing, new variants that are been coming up, and then what is their immunological response to various vaccines. This has to continue regularly. Next is, we have to see this as an opportunity beyond all this. Remember one thing, in the case of India, we have to provide for surveillance. What is meant by this surveillance? India has no definite surveillance system or not very strong system. Kerala is a state that has this. In this scenario, developing a backup bottom-up surveillance system is the first strategy. And then database related to health, it has to be shared across the states. In case of COVID-19, central government taking a stern action and coordination was very helpful. Zoonotic diseases are expected to be increased in the coming years. In this context, it is very necessary. And then here they have spoken about concept of One Health. Understand what is this One Health? So we have to integrate human health, animal health, environmental health as one single entity. That is what is called One Health concept. So India has to promote this One Health concept, not just person being healthy, the environment and also animals shall be healthy. That kind of responsible behavior has to be developed. And one more thing is, COVID is a challenge during which we can raise health standards of the country. We can increase the standards of the primary health care center. The biggest thing which supported India during COVID-19 is the vaccine infrastructure India has having. Remember, India is considered as the vaccine capital of the world. Now let's go to the next article, a retelling of Indian migrant workers' plight. Here we have to understand one report. International Organization on Migration, it gives a report called World Migration Report. According to this, around 28 crore people are migrants, international migrants. 2/3 of this population are working labor. In this case, there is one corridor which is very famous. That corridor is called as Gulf South Asia corridor. It means many of the people from South Asian countries, Nepal, India, Pakistan, they all goes to Gulf. If you go to Dubai airport, Almost 80% of the people who are working there will be from Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. In this scenario, their security and protection is not been seriously addressed. What are the problems of these migrant workers? In this case, wage theft. It means what is the wage promised to them, what actually given to them is different. And there is a system there which is called as Khalafa system. Under this system, you have to bound to the employer who has got you the visa. It means you cannot have flexibility in your job. And if employer is exploitative, not paying, still you have to stick with him. So that system is very exploitative. And also working conditions are very poor. Especially in the Gulf region, the summer is too severe and the working quarters and added to that basic amenities provided to them are missing. And then whenever these people have issues, the judicial system in these countries is not transparent, and any kind of small cases also the punishment is very severe. So no transparent judicial system, harsh punishments makes the life very difficult for these people. And when we come to the women migrant labor, the problem is sexual exploitation. So in this case, Philippines stands as a good example to India. So Philippines is providing the legal support to its migrant workers who are the victims of wage theft. What is wage theft over here? Something is promised to a worker and it is not been given. That is what is called wage theft. In this case, in the case of India, what is the scenario? There is an act in India that is called as Immigration Act. So this Immigration Act was enacted in way back in 1983 and still now we did not modernize this particular act. So taking the Philippines as example, India also has to revisit its Immigration Act. That is what is the essence of this article. Next is focus on Africa, the heart of global south. Now you know India is the president of G20 and also India always maintains strategic autonomy in its international affairs. In this context, from the days of NAM, non-aligned movement, one of the objectives is to maintain strategic autonomy with regard to its dealings with global affairs, dealings in global affairs. Now, in this scenario, G20 presidency, India has to promote South-South cooperation. So, the South-South cooperation, the significant player will be Africa. So, we conduct African Union India summits. But what happened recently is we haven't conducted them because of COVID-19. Now, if you take China, it is going leaps and bounds in Africa. So, China has got a lot of support from Africa. And Africa is also an unexplored mineral rich resource country. In this case, China is able to muzzle its industries through the mineral power of Africa. If you consider the trade of China with Africa, it has crossed $250 billion and investments have crossed around $43 billion. And United States of America is also way back or way behind compared to China. Coming to India, India is nowhere in the top 5 list with regard to trade with Africa. India has a strong cultural and historical ties with Africa, but economic ties are missing. In this case, what we shall do? Let us understand the Chinese strategy over here. So China has forum on China-Africa Cooperation FOCAC. So in this, the president himself will involve in this cooperation meeting every year. It is continuous and regular. India also has to go for a regular interaction and also has to work closely with the African countries. Next is the parliamentary panel. You know about the standing committees, right? On tourism, there is a standing committee, the standing committee on information, transport, culture and tourism. So tourism, transport and culture, that is the standing committee. This standing committee has clearly stated that the government is not doing what it is supposed to do with regard to the promotion of tourism. What is it failing to do? The first is GST council like tourism council shall be created. That is what is the first recommendation, where all the states shall become the participants. And then the tourism has to be brought into concurrent list so that we can have a coordinated national policy across the country. And if banks have to infuse money into the sector, the governments have to recognize hospitality sector as an industry. As of now, they do not have an industry status. Once they get the industry status, they get relatively low interest rate loans to them and high dispersal of loans, which will help them to establish. Next is India's bid to beat cervical cancer. We discussed about human papilloma virus, and this human papilloma virus is responsible for cervical cancer. India has got the highest burden of cervical cancer. In this case, early screening and vaccination is very critical. So the government of India is bringing cervical cancer vaccine as part of universal immunization program. The name of this is Sarvavac. And remember one thing, early screening and detection, added to that, if necessary, vaccination. These are the things are critical to decrease the disease burden in India. So India's cancer incidence is increasing year on year. That is one point which we need to remember. So 9 to 14 years of girls, they will be given Cervavac vaccine in India. This is what we need to understand. Thank you very much.